that we'll find typically in our cars. So one, you'd be wrecking that quicker than a dog with a new toy, trust me. All right, let's get these bearings out. So method number one, next best method, if you've got a Mecateh, it's worthwhile just checking these little flanged sway bar bearings because mine felt like a dog's breakfast. So Hey everyone, it's Mark here, and today we're back on the Mecateh FW01 RC CAR. Normally I'd point over there, but as you can see, it's still in 44,000 different pieces. That's right, it's still not back together. However, it's a good opportunity for us to talk about bearings. So what do I mean? Well, there's plenty of videos out there about cleaning bearings, but nobody talks about how to install bearings and how to install them, especially into hard aluminium parts. So today, I'm going to show you guys the right way to install bearings in aluminium parts. You can even use it in the smaller scales. Even 10 scale cars have some aluminium parts, clutch bells, bits and pieces. So I'll show you today how to install bearings correctly because there's really not much information out there on the net around it. And before you go skipping off into the video to all the exciting bits like I know you all do, a disclaimer, I'm going to show you the incorrect way to install the bearing as well. So don't be skipping off and seeing me install the bearing like an idiot and then commenting down below that I don't know what I'm talking about. So just be careful of that one, guys. Make sure you watch the video from the start to the end in full. I promise not to bore you too much. Anyway, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and let's get into it. All right, it's bearing replacement time in the Mecateh FW01 RC CAR. I've got brand new bearings here from Plague Bearings, and today we'll be installing those in the rear hubs, in the diff carrier and in the lay shaft carrier there. All right, so I'm going to show you how to install bearings today the right way. I'm also going to focus on the wrong way because the wrong way is very important. So we'll start with the wrong way first. Let's take a close look at some bearings that we'll find typically in our cars. So one is the rubber sealed bearing and two is the metal sealed bearing. So that's a rubber dust cover and that's a steel dust cover there. So let's have a close look at the bearing. So we have the outer race, the inner race, and then we've got the little ball bearings in there that provide that precision roll. Now, how are they held together? Well, in a larger bearing like this, they're held together with a metal cage in there. And if you can see that metal cage, it is very thin and flimsy. Some of the smaller wheel bearing type bearings have a plastic cage in there. So those balls are suspended via a plastic cage. So a bearing has great resistance in this vertical plane, but in this horizontal plane, the lateral movement, they're not fantastic. The reason why, the limiting factor is that cage, and it's the reason why we have to install these very, very carefully. Now what happens if that cage wasn't there? If that cage wasn't there, those ball bearings wouldn't be evenly spaced and that center race would more than likely just fall out of that outside race there and you'd have a bearing no more. Now, just to show you how delicate that thin metal cage is, I've got one here taken apart. So let's have a quick look at the cage. So that's the cage, and look how easy it is deformed. Not very strong at all. So the dust cover as well, look how flimsy that is. You bend that easily. So why am I showing you this? Well, look at how a bearing might be installed. We want to install this bearing in there. Popular method is to just grab a socket and give it a good whack with a hammer to install the bearing. But what are we doing there? Let's have a close look. We're hitting on that inner race, and in doing so we're putting a lot of pressure on that cage. You saw how thin that cage was. You'd be destroying that, you'd be wrecking that quicker than a dog with a new toy, trust me. Even worse would be to grab a socket and bash away right there on the outside. Look at that. Can you see how damaging that would be for a bearing? But trust me, I've seen people do it. They see that metal dust cover on the outside and they think they can just hammer away at that. But look how thin and flimsy it is. Look at that. And the cage inside, look how easily it's damaged. Alright, let's get these bearings out. So I've got a socket that's just slightly larger than the OD of the bearing, so that's the outside diameter of the bearing. And we're going to place that over the socket. We're going to take a punch and we're going to punch the bearing out. Just remember, if you have to give it more than one strike, hit the other side of the bearing too so it comes out evenly. That one there, whoop, will I find that again? Could be a spare part. No, look at that, we found him. The other side now. What am I doing? The other side now. Sit him there and we're just going to punch down. Next one, we've got the diff carrier. So I've just got a spacer there. It's slightly larger than the OD of the bearing. And then I've got something, it's another socket to fit inside there just to punch that bearing out. There it is there. Easy as that. The trusty miscellaneous fixing drawer. Every good workshop should have one of these. And it should be disorganised just like this one, so it takes you forever to find something. Ooh, close. Not quite long enough. Could be a contender. Can we find a nut? Winner. Don't lose it. All right, let's get these bearings back together with method number one. The first thing we need to do is, where you got aluminium, is just give that inner bearing surface a bit of a clean. Just inspect that inner surface for any damage. And then the next tip I'm going to give you is to put a little bit of grease on that inner surface there. It doesn't need much, just the tiniest bit. Why do we do that? Because steel and aluminium aren't the best of friends, and that grease will just provide a little bit of lubrication to get those bearings in, and it'll provide just a little bit of insulation between the steel and aluminium. Because believe me, steel and aluminium don't mix. So method number one, we're going to use the clamping method with a bolt. So it's pretty easy. You just need a couple of washers that are bigger than the bearing. So as the bearing gets clamped and pulled in, the bearing surface is on both of those races and it doesn't put any pressure on that inner race. So I'll show you what I mean. We'll sit a bearing in there, bolt, we'll put the spacer on, another bearing, just make sure it's in there nice and square, washer, and then we're just going to clamp that together. It's going in there very easily. So that's the first bearing in, seated all the way. Now the next one. That's it, seated all the way. Look at that. Now, isn't that a much better way than bashing those things in with a socket? Let's just have a feel. Get that spacer. Oh yeah. Next best method, if you don't have a bolt handy, is the compression method, and I'm just going to use this little machinist vise here that I have. So same as before, we'll give those a quick clean. Quick grease. Bearing in one side, we're just going to make sure that that bearing is square when we start it. What happens if it's not square? It'll try to go into that aluminium on an angle, and the steel is much harder, that high-speed steel is much harder than that aluminium, and it'll just carve its way in there and destroy that. So you just need to make sure it's nice and square in there. Don't forget your spacer, because once you take these bearings out, that's it, they're toast. You need to replace them. Bearing square, in the vise, compression method. First bearing's up, need to square that up a little bit. There's the next one in. Easy as that. So if you've got a Mecateh, it's worthwhile just checking these little flanged sway bar bearings, because mine felt like a dog's breakfast. So some new ones, and you can buy them really cheap. You can get them aftermarket, so well worth replacing. Cheap as chips. Yeah. You can see why fidget spinners are so popular. Well, that's it guys, video done. Fresh bearings in the Mecateh FW01 RC car. So the takeaway for today's video is don't be belting down on that inner race of your bearing turning into a dog's breakfast. Actually, that's something I didn't touch on in the video and I should have. If you're installing a bearing onto a shaft, just remember that pressing surface, that bearing surface needs to be the inner race. So just remember that. Let's just hope you watch this video all the way to the end to pick up that tip, because that is a valuable one. Anyway, thanks for watching guys. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. Remember to subscribe. Actually, I've got an answer a question. And there was a good question from Falcon 121 GP. So the Falcon asked about setups for the FG 4-wheel drive 1/5 scars, and whether I'd be touching on that in future videos. And the answer is, Falcon, yes I will be. So I hope to do a theory/practical video. So what does that mean? Well, what I want to do is I want to go to the track and actually demonstrate some of the changes and how they affect the car. So it's going to be a great video to look out for. So remember to subscribe to the channel and make sure the notifications are on so you get those notifications. But anyway, thank you very much Falcon 121 GP. I appreciate the support and the question. Actually, just a shout out for the Falcon. Those guys, I'm sure it's these guys, those guys are the Texas 5, hopefully I got that right. Anyway, if you're in that area, those guys race around some tracks there, 5th scale, so Tourers, 1/5, 4-wheel drive and some GT classes I believe. Anyway, great bunch of guys. So if you're local to them, look them up on Facebook and head out to the track with those guys. And one more thing, if you're wondering what all these a couple of FG 4-wheel drive 1/5 scale cars came up for sale locally here, and I snaffled those up. So I might race one, that's right, I'll be racing the old Minis, showing the old young 27 just how it's done. And the other one, I'm thinking about sponsoring a young driver. So that's someone, say between the ages of 16 and 20, that is interested in racing, and that's local to me here. So if you are and you're interested in maybe doing half a season of sponsored racing, reach out to me and we'll see if we can't make that happen. Anyway, thanks for watching guys, and we'll catch you next time.